Good morning, Skallywags. Spoo here with another mindless... Nope, that's not right. I did it on purpose.
I know, but I couldn't help it.
I did that totally on purpose. No, this is a brand new show here on Skallywag Productions that we are calling a series of enigmatic events by Lemony Snickets. Basically, this inaugural episode, it's a little it's a work in progress, we'll say. So the set is very temporary. The lighting's not all that wonderful right now. That will change, but we wanted to get this started by the beginning of the year, so here we are. So what is this? Well, first of all, joining me onto this little journey into the unknown, this is AJ. Say hello, AJ.
Hello, AJ.
Of course. Why wouldn't you say that? And together we are going to be taking a look into any and all things unanswered. Whether that is, unsolved crimes, cryptids, strange disappearances, UFOs, legends, myths. If it doesn't have an answer, we are going to dive into it and see what we can uncover. Obviously, when you've got that much territory, it's going to bring up the question of, well, where do you start? So
at the beginning.
That's the best place to start. This one, the answer comes in a form of a kind of a coincidence that then turned into another coincidence, which then kind of led to a rabbit hole that went so deep. Is the KGB still a thing? Because it might...
I don't know.
It might be. I don't know.
I went on their website. So.
Yes, we accidentally ended up on the CIA, NASA, KGB, several
Pentagon.
other... We ended up on their websites while we were doing research for this. We don't know how we got there, and for the life of us, we've been unable to recreate the circumstances that led us there in the first place. It doesn't even show up in our internet history, which... If we disappear suddenly,
that's why.
That is why. So anyway, we were able to find 3 different stories, and we found a pattern with those stories that kind of bring them all together. So that's what we're going to be doing for our inaugural episode. I should rather say this episode is actually going to be released in 4 parts. We're going to cover 3 different cases, and then the 4th episode, we will bring them all together and kind of tie them in our little conspiracy knot. Bow. That was me tying a bow. Going forward, however, most of the other shows we believe in this series will be kind of a one and done type of thing. You might see a 2-parter here and there, but for the most part, they'll be one and done. If you want us to release it as one giant thing, we can do that, but it'll be like 4 hours long, probably.
Let us know in the comments.
If that's what you want. Yeah. Sure. That being said, a quick disclaimer. There are going to be a lot of details in these cases that we are not going to talk about. At least a couple of these are really, really popular cases, today's especially. But as I mentioned, we kind of tied them all together into one narrative, and as such, there are a good number of pieces of evidence or information that either didn't fit into that narrative, not that they took away from it, they just didn't fit in and became unimportant. So yes, we are aware there are little pieces that we're leaving out, and that is okay. We're doing it on purpose. So before you jump in the comments and was like, well, you didn't talk about that she did blah, blah, blah. It's all right. We know. I think that's a good enough introduction. Yeah. Enough of my rambling. So here we go. What you got for me?
Okay, so in the United States alone, there are 4,400 unidentified bodies every year. By the end of the year, 1,000 of them usually remain unidentified. Most people, when they think unidentified bodies, they think they don't have loved ones, they're homeless, they're from out of town.
Off the grid. Yeah.
Off the grid. What you don't necessarily automatically go to is that this person was a spy.
Well, these cases that we're going to be talking about, they might have been.
They might have been.
At the very least, it's entirely possible that not only were they from the same country, possibly even working for the same organization, but yeah, there's a lot of little ties and things that definitely would suggest this. What we do know is that each one of them was found dead in the same country, that being Norway, about 10 years apart from each other. One in the 70s, one in the 80s, and one in the 90s.
On an impressive note, as I mentioned before, there are 4,400 unidentified bodies in America alone. Yeah. Worldwide, you can just imagine that is a huge number considering the number in America. But in Norway, there are 15. And that's not just in a year. That is 15
overall,
and that is as of 2019.
which means that we're literally going to be covering 1/5 of Norway's entire unidentified unidentified cold cases. So yes, take 1/5. That's insane.
After diving down the rabbit hole with these cases, we found what we think could be a singular origin, and that could date back to World War II.
And just so you know where we're headed to, in case you would like to do some sleuthing of your own, just to kind of keep up to speed in between the episodes and whatnot, we mentioned that these are pretty popular cases, at least 2 of the 3. They are in order: the Isdal Woman, the Oslo Woman, also known as Jennifer Fairgate, and the Cambo Man. Up first, the Isdal Woman. As I mentioned, probably the most popular case out of the 3. If you are a fan of Unsolved Mysteries, whether that be the show itself or just in general, or you follow any YouTube channel that talks about this type of thing, you've probably heard of the Isdal Woman before. And if not, the Isdal Woman is basically an unidentified body that was found in Ice Valley, otherwise known as Death Valley, near Bergen, Norway, in November of 1970. Although the Isdal Woman's death was pretty much, it was ruled as a suicide by the authorities, pretty much all of the evidence would suggest not at all the case.
On November 29th, 1970, a man and his 2 daughters were hiking on the mountain known as Death Valley or Ice Valley near Bergen. As they were coming up the mountain, they started smelling this putrid, burnt smell.
As you do.
Yeah, and then they came across a burned, charred body. Now, this is 1970, no cell phones, so they turned left, got the police, and informed them what they found.
So basically, the body was found. It's lying face up. The hands are up like this, so sort of in a boxing position. The front side of her completely burned to the point that it's completely unrecognizable.
Yeah.
However, her back completely untouched, completely unburned. Lying around her, there's a whole bunch of stuff lying around her. So I'm going to actually read this off a list here, so bear with me. Okay, so they found near the body, partially affected by fire, an empty bottle of St. Halvard liqueur, 2 plastic water bottles, a plastic passport container, rubber boots, a woolen jumper, a scarf, nylon stockings, an umbrella, a purse, a matchbox, a watch, 2 earrings, and a ring. Several of these items were actually said to have been neatly placed near the body, sort of like they were put there on purpose. They also found there was a lot of burned pieces of paper laying around, and under the body actually was a fur hat, which would be later found to have traces of gasoline on it. The most important thing to note here, all of these items, including what she's wearing, any kind of tag, label, anything that can actually identify, the make of whatever this item is, had been purposely removed or rubbed off.
3 days later, the police found 2 suitcases at the Bergen train station. In these suitcases were clothing, wigs, shoes, passports. She had 8 fake passports, money, eczema cream, coins from all kinds of countries. She had a pair of sunglasses that had a single fingerprint on them that went back to her. She also had a pair of non-prescription glasses. She had a notepad that had some weird code on it.
We'll get to that in a moment.
There was also maps, timetables, all kinds of stuff. Inside the lining of the suitcase, the police opened it up and they found 5 100 Deutsche Mark notes hidden inside.
So already we have a dead woman who is completely burned only on the front side, the back side completely untouched. You have all of the labels and tags from her clothing and all of her belongings completely torn off, removed, rubbed off, whatever. You got 2 suitcases miles away at a train station, like she's in the process of trying to leave town, and they're just left there for whatever reason. Inside, they find currency from several countries. They find several disguises, wigs, all that type of stuff, eczema cream, come on, and 8 fake passports. Actually, depending on what source you read, sometimes it even says there were 9 of them. So around 8 or 9 fake passports, none of which were found to be her real name.
Yeah, they're all fake.
So you can already see how people can believe that this woman was a spy. But oh, does it get better? We are just getting started. So she's burned. Horribly, horribly, unrecognizably burned on the front side. So you probably would think, well, that's how she died. However, an autopsy would actually show that in addition to carbon monoxide having been inhaled, she also had 50 to 70 sleeping pills that had only partially been soaked into the bloodstream in her stomach. So that is actually why they would rule it as a suicide, because of all the sleeping pills. But then you also have the carbon monoxide poisoning, and they did find soot in her lungs, which would basically indicate she was alive while she burned.
No offense, I would not want to kill myself by burning myself.
No. Absolutely not. So during the autopsy, they actually took out her jaw. She had several gold fillings in her teeth, so they thought maybe this will help us identify her. They also took tissue samples. They took several of her organs, saved those to be tested as well.
All trying to figure out who she was.
Yes. So even with all of this, they're basically running on little to no information. So they reached out to the public, basically asking if anyone, can you identify this woman? Do you know anything? Have you seen her? Any piece of information would be helpful. And it didn't take much time at all. Fortunately, a lot of people came forward, and at least some semblance of a story,
a timeline,
started to form.
So the last time this woman was seen, alive anyway, was on November 23rd, when she checked out of her hotel room at the Hotel Horteheimen in Bergen. The staff at the hotel described her as 5'4", really, really nicely dressed, very neatly dressed. Round face, dark hair. Staff also noticed that she stayed in her room. She kept to herself. She paid her bill and left. They noted that she left with a taxi, but her movements after that November 23rd, we really don't have a lot of information from the November 23rd till when her body was found on November 29th.
So earlier we noted that there was a notepad found in all of her belongings that had some sort of weird code in it. Well, it turns out that code actually kind of broke down where she was staying, in what town, on what dates, that type of thing. So it may have just been some sort of shorthand for herself, even though it would be kind of a weird shorthand, but
it was very cryptic.
Regardless, it helped them to kind of put a timetable together of where she had been and kind of what her travel plans were. And this is back in the 70s, where all of the hotel check-ins were actually handwritten, so they were actually able to use the book along with the login books from the different hotels to figure out, okay, she stayed here on these dates from this time, that type of thing. They were able to put those things together to find out that she had actually traveled to a number of places all around Norway. She had been to Bergen actually pretty early on, where she then traveled to Oslo, Trondheim, and Stavanger, and had at least one other stop actually in Paris, which is the only one that wasn't in Norway. So she leaves, she goes to France, she comes back, and then she ends up in Bergen, Norway again for the second time. And as we kind of start to put these puzzle pieces together, you might remember some of those towns because they will probably come up again.
Yes.
So once she arrives back in Bergen, which again, this is her second time in Bergen, she actually changes hotels in the middle. So she stays in one hotel for a few days, changes, goes to another hotel, which is a strange move for her. She hadn't done that type of thing before. But even in the second hotel, the last place she stayed, the staff there actually pointed out that she was pretty well known for changing rooms multiple times inside the hotel. So that is another type of thing that will raise a few red flags, we should say.
So as previously stated, there was at least 8 fake passports. I'm going to use this list because I'm going to tell you the names.
We have big words from Norwegian words are hard to read, and lots of things in list form. So instead of using little, yeah, you get it.
Yeah. So on these passports, these are her aliases. There was Guinevere Lancer, Claudia Tilt, Claudia Nilsson, Alexia Zarn Marquez, Vera Jarl, Miss Lena
Leenhofer.
Elizabeth Leenhofer, and the last one was Fenella Lorch.
And if anyone has any of these names and we have horrifically butchered them,
I apologize.
Sincerely. It'll happen again, trust me.
Each of these passports had a different name, of course, a different birthday. They all had a different occupation. However, one detail always remained the same, and that is the country of origin, which was Belgium.
And we should again say, you might remember that for later, because that may come up again as well.
It probably will.
Yeah. And for many, many years, that's kind of where everything stopped. They didn't really have a lot to go on. A lot of the details hadn't really come in yet, and for a while, that's just where it stayed. I mean, certainly not much.
No.
Definitely.
No. And what they did have didn't make sense.
Right, and they hadn't really started to put a lot of the pieces together. Now, again, there are a lot of details from this particular part of the investigation where we are leaving some of those things out because they will be important later. But yeah, for a while, that was that. However, in more recent years, actually, this is not too terribly long ago, a few new things started to pop up.
So, as I mentioned before, when she left her hotel, she left in a taxi cab. Now, the police did try to find that taxi driver for years. Their efforts were futile. But several years ago, like this is years after this happened, a taxi driver did come forward, wanted to remain anonymous. He came forward with a story. His story is that he picked her up. They were joined by a man in the cab. He drove both of them to the train station. And this is the train station where 3 days after her body was found, they found her 2 suitcases.
And this whole thing kind of bothers me a little bit because, like, they really wanted to find this cab driver because, you know, she leaves the hotel and the next time she's seen, she's dead. So the taxi driver was kind of the missing piece to the puzzle. Sort of, you know, this was the guy that knew how she got to where she was going.
The last person to see her alive.
So they searched for this guy for years, and they can't figure out who it was, can't find him. And then a cab driver comes forward and says, "Hey, I recognize the picture you put out of the Isdal Woman
years ago,
and I gave her," this was like 2005.
Yeah.
Somewhere in that ballpark anyway, early 2000s. So 30 years after the woman's found dead, and he's like, "Hey, I gave her a ride." So, 1, are you sure you actually remember what you remember? 2, why did you wait 30 years to come forward? 3, why would you want to remain anonymous? What do you have? What is he hiding? I mean,
or what did he see?
Yeah,
who did he see?
That's the part that sounds so strange to me. I mean, like, if it was sort of a spy thing, you could think, well, maybe he was threatened or something. Keep this quiet.
I feel like if it's a spy, he's dead already.
Well, I mean, he's just a cab driver. But I mean, they do pick up this unknown mystery man halfway through the trip. So, he could very much come in and just, as they're getting out, just hold a gun to the guy's head. "We were never here. You saw nothing. You know nothing."
He watches a lot of
that
movies.
type of. I don't know. I mean, it's all speculation, obviously, but it just seems weird to me that you have this cab driver that comes forward, gives this story 30 years after the fact, and insists on remaining anonymous.
Why?
I mean, I guess maybe it could be I don't want the publicity or whatever of my name getting out there, but I don't know. That part just it just bothers me. But as fate would have it, it would turn out that this mysterious cab driver and this mystery man that rode halfway along with them would not be the only mystery man in this case. In fact, several people would come forward from various hotels or just random people, what have you. It doesn't really specify in the stories, but the Isdal Woman had been spotted multiple times all throughout town, meeting with 1 to 2 men. Usually they would be meeting in like a restaurant setting or a bar.
Or the hotel bar.
Yeah, that type of thing. Actually, in fact, the hotel bar was actually one of the last places where she had been spotted. They always mentioned that it looked like she was meeting these men in an official sort of meeting sort of setting. It wasn't just
friends.
Catching up with friends. It was like, I'm meeting 2 fellow colleagues of mine and we are discussing business things of some sort. Well, around 2005, I mentioned that a minute ago with the cab driver, but I think I may have actually been remembering this part. Fast forward to 2005, and there is a guy that saw the sketches of the Isdal Woman, and he also believes that he may have seen her 5 days before the body was found.
Which was on the 29th, and she left on the 23rd.
Right. So maybe somewhere either on the day, the day after, somewhere in that ballpark. He remembers her. Basically, he says that he couldn't help but notice this woman because he saw her walking near where the body was found, actually, and that it was odd because here's this, this treacherous terrain and whatnot. She's walking with 2 men, and she was, as he put it, dressed for the city. Definitely not wearing some hiking boots or whatever. She's got like high heels heels and a dress and stuff.
She was known for her
Dressing very
impeccable dress.
Right. So yeah, so he sees her. She's sort of dressed to the nines. Says that she's walking in this weird area, you know, with two men who looked southern Norway, I guess. I don't know if there's a certain look from that area, but that's how he put it. And said that she looked very resigned. So she didn't really want to be there. And even at one point looked at him, looked like she was about to say something to him, but never did.
Huh.
So of course that memory stuck with him, and he, comes up about 8 years later. So he goes to his friend, who is a cop, and he tells him about the story. And his friend, the cop, says, just forget about it.
Did he do this 30 years before, or
that I don't know.
Or was it like right then?
I tried to look for this in my research. I dug hard, and I personally couldn't find it. If anyone else can find it, please let me know. It does not specify if
when his friend told him.
I saw this woman out walking with two men. She looked like she was going to say something to me, never did, and then they find this body there a couple of days later. Can you help me with this? Just forget about it. Or if it's 30 years later and he's telling his buddy about it, and his buddy's like, forget about it. Which would make way more sense.
That would.
But I don't know. That's another one of those little things that
if you know,
bugs me.
If you know, put it in the comments. Let us know.
I'm guessing he went to his friend the cop in 2005. But
I feel like that's a really long time. Like Bergen, Norway. This is a city, but it's not as big as you think in your head. It's a smaller city. If I saw a lady walking with two men and she looked resigned and she didn't look like she wanted to be there, and then like 5 days later, a body of a woman was found, I would come to the cops.
I mean, for all we know, he may not have even known that a body was found. I mean, he could have not watched the news, and maybe 30 years later, he's watching a documentary, and here's this woman, and he's like, that is that woman I saw.
I feel that's suspicious.
But it is, especially because, unless you just thought she was the hottest woman you've ever seen in your life or something.
Why would you remember
Why
her?
would you remember her face 30 years later?
I work retail. I can't remember people's faces 5 minutes.
I'm lucky if I can remember what you look like.
That is not a good sign.
Of course, I have no, actually, that's not true. I am terrible with names, but I do remember faces. I just never remember where I know them from.
Well, and that could be. I mean, we're not saying this guy's a liar. I actually think he's telling the truth.
I just think it's weird.
I think it's a weird thing.
Anyway, so, long story, very short. We did have to condense this one a lot simply to get the intros and stuff like that out of the way for the first episode. But we are still left with a few lingering questions. The rest of it we will come back to, we promise. But who is the Isdal Woman?
Was she a spy?
If she wasn't a spy, could she have truly been an antiques dealer or an art dealer like she sometimes claimed to be?
Maybe she was an art thief.
Maybe so.
International art thief.
Or maybe she was just, a lonely woman on vacation. We honestly, we don't know.
But a lot of the evidence and a lot of the stuff that's connected to her does tend to lead toward more of an espionage kind of feel, or art thief kind of feel.
I mean, and maybe that's largely just because, we romanticize that type of thing, so we really want to believe that it is that, but I mean, we honestly will probably never know. This could honestly be just one of those random, completely mundane scenarios that just has little weird things that surround it, some unknown things, and like I said, we romanticize the unknown, so our brain starts to run away with those things, and it could be nothing. It could be nothing at all.
But do you really think it was suicide, or was it murder?
That's another unanswered question that we will probably never know the answer to. I mean, it could be nothing more than some weird, bizarre accident. She accidentally took some sleeping pills and then set herself on fire before landing in a place called Death Valley.
Yeah, I don't know. It could be a suicide. It really could. I personally don't think it could be, just because I feel like if you're going to kill yourself, the sleeping pills, if she was just found with sleeping pills in her stomach, I would be like, okay. But burned.
My take on it, if it was a suicide, the only way that this would make any sense if it was a suicide, she is going to set herself on fire for whatever reason. So she takes the sleeping pills hoping that she will pass out from those before she feels the effects of being burned. Or she takes the sleeping pills, they're not kicking in fast enough, so she sets herself on fire to finish it off.
But she sets herself on fire only on the front.
Yeah, I mean, if you're soaking yourself in gasoline, you're dumping it over your head. It's gonna go both ways. You don't just. Well, let me.
This is very much like blowtorchy, kind of like like a flame. I know it's not, but you know what I mean. It's like it's very isolated on her body.
This is a woman who was already on the ground.
Yeah.
Had gas poured on her, set on fire, and while she's still alive, and she's got her hands up trying to stop them from doing whatever they're doing.
Also, we don't know where she was. Like, we know where she was before, and we know where she was up until the 23rd, but we don't know where she was between the 23rd and the 29th. And how long her body was there is still really kind of unknown because it was scorched, but they still smelled the scorchedness. Yeah. So it wasn't like...
It had been done recently.
It wasn't like... I don't think it would be done days and days before. It might have been like the day before.
I mean,
you can smell a fire
it's not like... Yeah, and it's definitely not like she burned for a long time. Otherwise, the rest of her body would have been burned, where only the front of her had been burned. So she burned for long enough that it burned the front side of her to being unrecognizable.
And she inhaled all the...
And she inhaled the soot and everything. So so she was alive when it happened, but she didn't burn for so long that it engulfed everything.
Well, and it didn't engulf the liquor next to her.
Right.
That's the other thing. Like, if she poured gasoline all over herself and she like weirdly laid down on the ground and set herself on fire, there's liquor right next to her. That fire will burn so bright and like it's gonna burn, like it's not going to go
right
for just fast. I don't know, it's just all weird. Plus, why put all your stuff right next to you,
neatly placed around?
And also, unless she was OCD,
possible.
I mean,
another unanswered question.
But also, why do you have all your suitcases at the train station where you drove on the 23rd, but you didn't leave town?
So, like, if I had to guess, I would say that, obviously she stays in one hotel. She moves from that hotel to a different hotel, and we'll get to why in the fourth episode. So make sure you subscribe and stick around for that. Hey. But she moves different rooms in the hotel, almost as if she's trying to get away from something or trying to get closer to something. She goes and she leaves, so now she's trying to get out of Dodge. Halfway there, they pick up a man who gets out at the train station with her. So we then know that she leaves the train station in pretty much a hurry because she left all of her stuff there, goes out to Ice Valley, is seen walking around where somewhere along the way they're joined by a second man.
Right. Where she looks, the way he described it with resigned, in my head actually just means that she was afraid.
Yeah.
Like she was afraid to talk.
That's why she's like, help me or something, but like she never said it, so she's just like...
She gives the look. If you've ever seen someone in distress, they give a look. Yeah. I feel like that's the look she gave, which is probably why her face stuck with this man. Yeah,
and let's face it, if you're going to commit suicide, you're not going to be hanging out with your buddies like, hey, come with me to the place I'm going to kill myself, and then just leave me here and you guys go ahead and take off while I'm out here in the middle of nowhere.
And where was she for 5 days?
Yeah. Like I said, we'll probably never know, but what do you think? Let us know down in the comments below. Discuss all that type of stuff. So that is going to wrap it up on the Isdal Woman. Now, as originally we were just going to do an episode on the Isdal Woman and then just kind of call it a day. But
but then we were watching something.
Yeah. So that somehow turned into a 4-part mini-series, and there's just so many. We noticed these little things that sort of tying these other stories together, and there was just so many unanswered questions. We couldn't.
Too many coincidences.
Not dive into it. So basically, here is what happened. As you may or may not be aware of, Netflix recently revived Unsolved Mysteries,
which we loved.
Yes. A little bit more, documentary-esque. They don't have the Robert Stack anymore, which that's unfortunate, but they pay homage to him, which that's cool. Anyway, the second wave of episodes just recently hit, and we were sitting at home, we were watching through those, and an episode comes up titled A Death in Norway, or Death in Oslo, or one or the other. Anyway,
I think it was The Death in Norway.
When the episode first came on, I was like, oh cool, it's the Isdal Woman.
No.
And then they start talking about a body found in a hotel. I'm like, no, she wasn't found in a hotel. And then they're like, and she gave the name Jennifer Fairgate. And I'm like, wait, no, she did. Wait, what? And realized this is a totally different story. But then, so I'm like, oh, that's cool. So we're watching. I'm like, well, that's a big coincidence. This is a lot like the Isdal Woman. But as the episode went on, I realized it's the same story with a different person. So I thought, well, maybe there are others that are like this. So we did a little bit of research, and sure enough, came up with another one, except this time it was a guy. So, well, and here we are.
And that is why our first episode is actually a four-part
miniseries. So, I definitely, want to apologize for this kind of being very... What's the word I'm looking for? Not polished, I guess I should say. Very, anyway.
He wants to apologize for this show and this episode being a little bit not as polished as he would like. The sets are not here yet.
It's a work in progress.
It is. But we did want to get this up before around January of 2021.
Start 2021 off right, because let's face it, we need 2021 to be started off right, and then hopefully then to stay that way.
So, but we hope that you guys will stick around as we dive deep and deeper into this conspiracy rabbit hole that we've found.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk about the Oslo Woman. We're gonna talk about the Cambo Man. That's gonna be episode 2 and 3.
Yes.
And then we're gonna talk about what we think connects them all in episode 4.
Yes. So definitely make sure that you subscribe so that you don't miss out on the remainder of this little mini-series and for all of our content, because we are going to do our best here to keep things coming consistently. So right about the time that I was ready to start rolling things before, the computer that I used for editing completely just
died.
Dead. So I didn't have a way to edit for quite some time. Otherwise, I had several things that I was going to release. Even shot several things. But now we are back up and running. Going to try to do this little 5-day-a-week thing for a while, so hopefully that works out. But at least for the 4-part mini-series, we're going to be doing this show on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Once we get the 4 episodes out of the way here in the next couple of weeks, we will see if that alters any, but I think we might try to stick with the Tuesday-Thursday format.
Thursday's good.
So, so there's that. We're going to be doing the Mindless Drivel stuff on Mondays and Fridays, and Wednesdays is...
You don't know what you're going to cover?
No, Wednesdays is a little different. I'll go ahead and say it. It's actually something that I announced a long time ago that I was going to start doing, and it's calling it the best movies never made, or the best that never was, something along those lines. But basically going to be doing movie reviews on movies that never got filmed.
So like scripts.
Alternate versions, yeah. So like the first draft or a canceled movie or, whatever it may be.
So just like this the Snyder cut
before
it was
sort of
actually released.
The first, I'll give you the example here, just a little teaser of what's to come tomorrow. The first episode is actually about Nightmare on Elm Street 3. When that first was going into pre-production, Wes Craven was actually originally going to come back and do part 3. He actually wrote a script. A lot of pieces from that script were eventually used in the movie that we got, but Wes Craven's script is so much darker and it is amazing, and I would have loved to have seen it. So we're going to go over and talk about what that script was. So
be sure to subscribe. You're going to get a bunch of different kind of content. You're going to get to see him like 5 days a week.
Ugly mug. 5 days a week.
You'll get to see me 2 of those days with him. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. But be sure to give us a like. Check us out on Facebook as well.
Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All the links will be at the end of the video.
And be sure to check out some of our friends as well. We'll probably post some of their links too.
Yeah, we got those over in our little follow stuff on the side over there. But yeah, so that is going to... Let me double check here, make sure we didn't miss anything. But yeah, we did. But we already talked about that stuff. Yeah, KGB.
That was weird.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about that, trust me.
So thank you guys for watching. Definitely comment, like, share, and please subscribe. And let us know what you would like for us to cover next in this series of enigmatic events.